In order to get to the point where you're actually watching this video, you had to think, I need to learn about the spinal cord today. And then your body moved to your computer or your iPhone probably, and you searched up spinal cord and you found me, this glimmering face, on your YouTube channel. And you might thank your brain for that, because the brain was kind of the one who initiated it all, right? And made yourself walk over and turn on your phone. But actually, surprisingly, most of those things were done via our friendly spinal cord today. Hey guys, this is instructor Mr. Jackson, and I'm going to teach you about the spinal cord today. Now, as you can see, this is kind of a weird looking shape right now, but I want to get your bearings here. If you were to look at your brain and your spinal cord, here's your brain on top, you got your spinal cord coming down, and as we talked about in previous videos, you've got spinal nerves that come out in pairs on either side. Okay, well, if you take a cross section of that and you look into the person that you just chopped in half, this is what you would see. You would see the ventral, so the front portion of the spinal cord, and then the dorsal or posterior, the back side of the spinal cord. And you also see these connections on the side, which are the spinal nerves. Now, before we go into the details about what the spinal cord actually contains, what it does, I want you to know the function. The function of the spinal cord is to integrate sensory and motor functions of the body. So just like I said earlier, you had to move to basically turn on your phone. Well, your brain initiated that stuff, but it had to go through the spinal cord first. So let me show you how that works. First off, we have to start in the center. Now, these sections are different in color. In the center, you will see that this will look more gray, whereas on the outside, you will see more white. This is because it's called white and gray matter. And what I want you to remember about these different sections of the spinal cord is that the gray matter is going to be the integration center. There's a lot of short connections between neurons integrating a bunch of information before they either get sent into the white matter, or if they come down from the white matter, they need to integrate into the gray matter first. So this is the main integration center. So gray matter is the main integration center. Okay? Now the white matter, this is where we are going up or down the elevator that is your spinal cord. This is a long distance communication, okay? So we have white matter because it is myelinated. Okay, so white matter is myelinated, and what myelin does is it speeds up the signal of the neuron. So if you're going to send a signal from, say, the base of your spinal cord up to your brain, it's likely that that neuron that's telling the brain something is in the white matter, okay? So just set that up. Now, I said this is sensory and motor integration center, right? Well, we will have sensory input coming towards the central nervous system, okay? So the sensory input, interestingly enough, will be coming from these spinal nerves and then go dorsally. So all of your sensory neurons are going to be coming in from this side. So they'll have some sort of dendrite extension out there, receive a signal, send its axon back towards the gray matter to integrate the information, and then it'll do something cool. So whenever you have some sort of sensory stimulus, it comes in from this dorsal aspect of the spinal cord. So sensory neurons coming in. Now, there's a little section up here called the dorsal root ganglia. This is where the collection of the neuron cell bodies lie in the sensory division, okay? And so all the cell bodies will be here. The dendrites will extend to basically feel what's going on outside, and it's going to send its signal via the axon this direction. So what it would really look like, if this was a neuron, it would have one branch that goes out here to grab the information, and then this end would be the axon to basically send the information into the gray matter, okay? So that is sensory information. Now, when the sensory information comes into the spinal cord, we can do a couple things with it. Let's say, for example, a spider is crawling on your skin. Well, we need to send that information up to the brain so that you can then look and see if it's actually a spider or if it's just the sweat dripping off your arm, right? Well, we need to send that information up to the brain, right? So let's example, sensory input comes in, spider's on your arm, okay? It needs to jump into the white matter to send a long distance signal, right? The regions of white matter that it'll hop into are right around this section, because these regions are ascending tracks. So these are the ascending tracks of the white matter. There's a few more that we'll talk about, but these deal primarily with, fine touch. So fine touch, as well as something called proprioception. Proprioception. So proprioception is just basically you know where your body is in space without actually seeing it. You just know where it's at, even if you close your eyes. I know my arm is up. That's proprioception. Now, both of these deal with both proprioception and fine touch on both sides of the body. So just because I wrote that on either side doesn't mean that they're just doing those. They're on both sides. They're mirror images of each other. So fine touch, proprioception, fine touch, proprioception. Now, I said the spider's crawling on your arm, right? Sensory neuron gets the information, sends its signal towards the spinal cord because that's a sensory neuron. It needs to integrate in the gray matter, so there will be a lot of neurons called interneurons inside of the gray matter. This is the integration center, remember? We want to talk to the white matter to send the information up to the brain so you actually detect that stimulus and notice it, right? So this neuron will then hop into this white matter and talk to another neuron that will then send its signal, its action potential, up to the brain. Okay, so let's walk that through again. Sensory input comes in, sends signal towards the gray matter, interneuron, right? Integration center. Sends it into the white matter for long distance communication. In this section for fine touch, and it goes up to the brain. You look at your arm and it's just sweat. So you don't need to move, right? But, what if it is a spider? Ugh. I would say that you want to get the spider off, right? So, what do you need? Well, you need to send a signal out, a motor signal out to move your muscles, right? Those motor signals, interestingly enough, go through this tract, the ventral tract. These will all be motor signals, motor neurons, that originate usually, I'll erase this arrow here, originate in the ventral aspect of the gray matter. So there's a motor neuron here that will send its signal all the way out to, say, your arm muscle so that you can move it and swat the spider away, right? So that neuron will talk directly there so you can move it away. You may see an issue. In order for this motor neuron to stimulate, it needs to get communication from somewhere, right? So your brain determined, hey, I need to send a signal to go move my muscle. And right now, it's just chilling by itself, so it needs to get talked to, right? Here's where the descending tracts come in. So in this little section right here on both sides, these are descending tracts. Okay, so they're going to be going downward from the brain to specifically the limbs. Okay, so again, long distance signal coming from brain down through this white matter where it will talk to, let's talk about this side, say a neuron in this white matter, okay, which will then somehow jump in here and communicate with this motor neuron. Okay, so long distance signal sent down the white matter, descending tract, sent to this neuron, talks to this motor neuron, which then moves your muscle. Do you see how complex this is? It's really interesting. So the spinal cord really houses all these motor neurons for your limbs to move. But the signal can get sent down from the brain in the white matter, hop into the gray matter, and then move your muscle. Very fascinating. Okay, well, you might be saying, well, Mr. J, that's all great. I can sense a spider on me, and proprioception, great, and I can move some stuff in response to that, but don't we feel pain? Don't we feel temperature? And can't we move up things other than our limbs? Absolutely. Well, in this region, in the ventral side, these sections deal with trunk motion. So if it's a trunk motion, so the motion of the trunk, so moving your torso, they're going to be descending tracts as well. Whenever it's a descending tract, it's usually going to talk with a motor neuron to move something, okay? So these will be part of the trunk motor regions coming from brain down to talk to motor neuron to move body, okay? Now, why is the trunk region smaller than the limb region? Why are there very small parts that deal with moving the muscles of your trunk versus dealing with moving the muscles of the limbs? You may have heard this from me before, but you have a lot of control over your limbs, right? Think of your hands, think of your arms. You can contort them in so many different angles and rays because you have more motor neurons going to them. So it makes sense that there's going to be a bigger region dealing with the limb motion than there is the trunk. The trunk is very big, broad movements. You can't really have these fine motor movements with your trunk as much as you can your limbs. So that's why it needs more space. Okay, so again, those were descending tracts for the limbs and the trunk. But I also said you can detect pain and temperature. These are in these regions. Okay, so a little more dorsal from the trunk regions. These are still ascending tracts, like I said. And these regions are going to deal with two types of sensory input: temperature and pain. Okay, so in this example, let's say we have sensory input, okay, coming in, talks to gray matter, talks to neuron, then it determines that that sensory input that you're getting is something that's painful, something that's noxious, it's going to hurt you. So it needs to hop into the white matter that deals with pain and temperature, specifically pain, talk to another neuron, which will then send its signal up into the brain to actually perceive that pain, okay? Now, if you need to move your arm away from it, right? Well, now we need to be able to talk to maybe a motor neuron in maybe the limb region, which would be found here, okay? So the motor neuron earlier for your arm was that side. Say you need to move your arm away from a painful stimulus. Well, that came, there's many steps to this, right? So let's say sensory input from this side of the body, so this would be your right side, okay, and you detect pain. Pain signal comes in here, pops into the white matter that deals with pain to go tell the brain. But let's say that it's going to be a reflex. So you touch a hot stove and you want to move your hand out of the way before your brain even knows it. Interestingly, instead of hopping into the white matter immediately, this neuron can directly talk to a neuron, a motor neuron, already there. So now that can send its signal out, motor, right? This is the motor division, and it can move the arm before you even get the signal that it is hot. So let me say that again. When you perceive a very dangerous stimulus, okay, talks to an interneuron in the gray matter because it's the integration center, right? It can directly talk to a motor neuron to move your arm away from that dangerous stimulus before it even gets sent up to the brain. So really, your spinal cord does a lot more than you think, right? Okay, so that is a very brief, quick overview of the spinal cord. Remember, it's the integration of the sensory and motor functions of the body through these spinal nerves. And as you can see, the spinal nerves contain both sensory and motor input and output. So the sensory would be coming in towards the spinal cord, and the motor division would be going out to the body to make different effects on the muscles and other things like that. I hope this was helpful. This does not show every single section, every single region of the body and what it or the spinal cord and what it deals with, but it is a very good overview to start with. Please drop any questions in the comments below. Hope this was helpful, and thank you for watching, and thank your spinal cord for getting you here.